everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healthy Living, Happy Midlife. I'm Denise Siegel, the menopause mentor, and I am here today with my friend Alexandra Niel, who is a women's empowerment coach. She is also a divorce recovery coach who helps ambitious women rediscover themselves after heartbreak and to rise into their next chapter with clarity, confidence, and courage. Alex, hi. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun.
This is going to be fun. Okay, so give us a little bit of the background, how you became a women's empowerment coach and divorce recovery coach.
Well, I went through my own divorce about 10, 12. God, I can't remember how long it's been. That's good.
That's
Um,
probably a good thing. Back
so,
in the day.
and when I came out of my divorce, I had given so much to my relationship, to my husband, to building his business, to building our home, to my career, that I came out of there and I was like, well, now what? Like who am I even? And
Mhm.
what do I want? And I had role modeled my mom really well because that's what she did in her marriage, right?
Mhm.
She gave to her husband, she gave to her kids. She was a stay-at-home mom. So her whole life was wrapped around serving her family.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. And when I came out and I was like, I don't even know what I knew what I didn't want, but I didn't know what I wanted, and I didn't understand like in the beginning, this is an awesome opportunity, right? Because we can like wipe the board clean and start fresh. So I went through that journey, and as I was getting on in years, um, I ran into so many women who were in the same situation of I've given so much to everybody else, which is also societal, by the way, because
Yes.
those are the
Mhm.
expectations that are placed on women, that, they also needed to go through that journey. And because I went through it first, and I'm still going through it 10 plus years later, right? It's a constant rediscovery and a constant growth. And
Mhm.
I was like, well, if I can help them through that journey, why would I not? Because we all need a little help from our friends, right?
Yes, says the Beatles and Alex Neil.
That's it.
It's interesting, the connection that I just made here with the divorce, the journey never ends, even though you've done things and you've moved forward and you have many things going on in life. There's always that's always part of your journey, similar to like in menopause, right? Everybody thinks you're in menopause, you're out of menopause, and you're done.
And it's like,
Yeah, okay, we're done. You're never done, because
yeah,
there's that next phase, right? And you don't always know what that next phase is going to bring,
yeah.
right? But once you've done work in the prior phases, it does
Hmm.
make the next phase easier, much more palatable, and really much more fun.
And like you said, it's easier to do it once you've already done it once, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may not necessarily approach things in the same way. The circumstances may be completely different. But once you've gotten over the, oh God, I gotta do this thing, right? You go through a growth spurt and it's not
Mm-hmm.
comfortable. But then it's like, it begins to shift your thinking from, I gotta do this to, hmm, I wonder what's gonna come out of that.
Mm-hmm. A bit like the, I have to do this versus the I get to.
Yeah.
Just the simple mindset shift in that. Ooh, interesting. So we know many people at this stage, right, in our lives, we're in our mid 50s, give or take, right? Um, we find that this seems to be a time when women um, are finding themselves in this position where they've kind of gone, you know, I've been doing all this for everybody else. I've had it. Something's got to give,
Hmm.
right? Whether that's they leave their job, they divorce their spouse, whatever it may be. What, in your experience, is that final thing or that thing that really women are saying, okay, I can't do this anymore, and then walk their way towards divorce?
I almost want to say that we reach almost like a saturation point,
Mm.
that we've given so much, right? And that we talked just before about things being societal, right? That the expectations placed on women. And I think that's such a big part of it, because when you think about what is expected of women, we're expected not to be too thin, not to be too fat, to dress well, to not dress, to be seductive, to be great mothers, to be great employees, to be great bosses. If we're like all of these things, it's like there is this myth of women having to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And as you get older, you start to realize that it's all hogwash. It's like there is no such thing as
Mm-hmm.
perfection. We might still want to strive for that,
Mm-hmm.
but we get to the point where it's like, you know what? That's just not going to happen, because no matter how you try to be perfect, no matter who you try to be perfect for, you're still going to piss somebody off because you're not going to be their flavor, right? So it comes to a point where it's like, okay, so if trying to please everyone isn't working, if trying to be perfect isn't working, why don't I start to make me happy?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a shift that happens as we get older, because we get to the point where like, well, screw everybody else's opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need their approval. I don't need their opinion. It's my life, and my opinion is the only one that matters. And we're like, okay, game on.
I think it's interesting that you just said that. I just thought of when I was growing up, the day that I remember no longer feeling like I had to have my parents' approval,
Mm,
right? And I was probably in my late 20s when I thought, the heck, this is my life, right? I, what, I mean, my parents walk their own journey. I'm on mine. We're all on our own path. Right? And those paths are never linear. You get that crooked, detour all over the place. But I remember that day very specifically. And it was very liberating.
mm,
And I think that's what, as women, we're really looking for, is that liberation to really
yeah,
understand and to really feel in our bones, to our core, that this is our life. This is liberating. This is who I am. Oh, but wait a minute, who am I?
yeah, exactly. It's like, yay, I get to be me. Ah, I get to be me, right? And you're like, well, how the hell do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know who I am.
How do you work with women, or what are those conversations with your clients when they're at that stage? Whether they're going through a divorce, it's done, or it's coming. Like, what are the conversations that you have with women when they're struggling with who I am? Who am I?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to really first knowing that it's okay that you don't know where you're at, right? Because your focus has always been outward. It's hasn't necessarily been inward. So we're not used to doing for ourselves. And that's basically where it starts, is that we need to get to a point where we start to do for ourselves the same way that we do for others. We extend ourselves compassion and grace and kindness, which how many times have you? Because I know I have plenty of time, right?
It should be more like this, right?
Yeah, exactly. And somebody that I know could do the same or make the same mistakes that I've made, and I'd be like, it's okay. It's it's fine. It's really not that big a deal. Meanwhile, I'm like have the self-kicking machine, right?
Mhm.
And it's like so being okay with um not knowing, right? That I think that's really the first step.
Mhm.
And it's about instead of I think we get in the habit of doing, right? We can be the
Mhm.
provider. We're always pushing, we're always striving for success. We have these weird definitions of what success means, which are really the definitions of what everybody else says success is. But we don't often take the time to think about, well, what does that mean for me? Because my
Mhm.
definition might be very different. So being able to reframe how all of these things impact me, and instead of pushing into the doing and the providing and the keeping it all together and doing all the things, taking a step back and being like, wait a minute, like I'm doing, but it's like when you want to go somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And you don't have a destination in mind. You can run like hell, right? You can like
True.
get in a car, you can find a plane, but if you don't know where you're going, you're basically on the road to nowhere.
True.
So be okay with not knowing, and then take a step back and think about, okay, new chapter, new moment. How do I want this next chapter to be written? And then starting from there.
Mhm. Much of what you've talked about is kind of that masculine energy, that masculine
Hmm.
world that we live in. Think about when you were young. There was always that next step of achieving. You go to high school, then you go to college, then you get your master's, then you do this, and like it's expected, and it's very masculine. Um,
Hmm.
but we're women, we're feminine, masculine. We do have the yin and the yang. Um, how do women who are just who that masculine energy is just so ingrained in who they are and what they are, what they do, how do we bring in this more feminine construct, the self-love, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I feel is knowing that there's nothing wrong with that masculine energy,
Mhm.
right? Because it's what drives us, it's what gives us structure, it's what helps us to take action. But when we do it from a place of, oh my God, if I don't do this, I'm going to miss out, or if I don't do this, I'm going to be judged, or it's a different energy than doing it from a place of, let me come back here, figure out what's right for me, and take action and behave in a way that feels aligned with who I am and what I want. I get goosebumps just talking about it because the energy is so different. It's an energy of embracing and support, and it's like putting a bubble around us that feels yummy and feels good. And when you're approaching things from that energy, you invite more of that in your life. So I
Mhm.
feel like I know many women, and I used to be like that, where it was like achieve, 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 go, 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 drive, 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 right? And over time, I realized that I was exhausted from always having that push.
Mhm.
And that in order to be effective, right, in my actions, my behaviors, my structure, I needed to like take a break and take a breath and just sit back and allow for things to be and allow for things to also come to me. But I needed to rest. because I think, we all have one of these guys, right? I don't know if you can see it.
Yep, I can see
And
it.
we we never let our phone get below, or seldom, 10%, right? Because it's like, oh my God, if my phone is below 10%, I can't call
Right,
people,
no
I
one's
can't
gonna be
do,
able to call me.
but we go to like minus whatever in our energy resources without resourcing
Mm,
ourselves. And
mhm.
then we wonder why we're cranky. And then we wonder why we're not effective at work. And then we wonder why we're biting people's heads off because the rubber band has snapped,
Mhm.
and it's time to
And
kind of,
menopause is happening to make it even
on top of
more,
everything.
on
Yeah,
top of everything, is making it that much
yeah,
more stressful.
absolutely. Because there's stuff that's happening that you're like, that never used to happen before. Like, what do I do with that? Like,
I know.
and so and when we look outside so much, we miss what's going on
Mm,
inside, and it makes our life so much easier, so much more difficult.
yeah. I think because of the way our society is, and I get it. I've been the go, 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 do, do, do. I remember at one point I was working in a job and I was really stressed out. And my assistant was kind of like trying, she's like looking in the door, should she come in? Should she not? And she said to me, and this was somebody who I felt comfortable with, and she said, sometimes you're kind of unapproachable.
Yeah,
And I went, oh, shoot, that's not my intention.
yeah,
Right. But
yeah.
somebody actually had to call it to my attention for me to actually realize it. And I
And
wonder if,
no, I was going to say, and think about also when you're operating so much from that masculine energy at work and you bring that home,
mm,
you got to leave that space for your guy to
mhm,
occupy that space, because that's what he's there for. That's what he wants to do.
mhm,
But we're so used to being in that mode that coming home, when that polarity shifts in the relationship, and when we have gone through a divorce and we are in that do, 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 do mode because we don't want to face our own emotions because it hurts and because it sucks, that's also not healthy, because that just delays the healing process. So
mm,
there's so much around. And again, I think masculine energy is awesome. But let's not forget that we also have this feminine energy, which is equally awesome
mhm.
and is even better at, when we're able to spend more time in that feminine energy, to really maximize the use of
Mhm.
our masculine energy.
I can see that. I had an image when you said, when you're the go, 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 do, 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 and you come home, all this masculine energy, and your husband, spouse, partner, they're the one, they're the masculine one, they're the men,
Yeah.
who need that. I can see where all of a sudden, there's headbutting there, and it's unintentional,
Hmm.
but it's just, I mean, when you have, I mean, think about when you have two, male cougars in a cage,
Yeah. Yeah.
wow, they go, there's just so much pent up emotion and stress.
And that's one of the two things that can happen, right? So you get two masculine energies and they're going to go at each other because one of them is going to want to dominate the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that happens is when you come home with that masculine energy and your man then takes on more of that feminine energy, the polarity goes completely
Mm,
different, right? And you might be feeling like, oh, I wish he would take on, like, I wish he would show up for me. I wish he would do, XYZ. But he can't
mm,
do that because it's like, the peg is already occupied. So you got to
mm,
leave that
mm,
space so that he can step in And that
Mhm.
reestablishes the polarity.
Mhm. I can see where there's a lack of communication in all
Mm,
of this, right? Um, and it's crazy how much I see the connection, things sometimes can be linear, at this time in life. um, Communication with our spouse about
mm,
menopause.
mm.
Like, we're going through stuff, we don't feel good, we're not sleeping, we have all these things, right? And we're not communicating. And then we have this other stuff, this masculine energy stuff that we're still trying to do, and we're not talking about that. And so that is where I see, like, where everything can just, you know not explode, implode,
Yeah,
right? At some point something's got to give, right? So
agreed.
what what can we do, what can women do, what are some of the steps, whether they've gone through their divorce, in the middle of their divorce, what are some of the things that they can do to feel more stable, more in control, more connected to that feminine energy?
So the first thing I think is really slowing down and being able to ground themselves in safety. When there's so much turmoil, our nervous system goes into overdrive and we don't feel safe. So being
Mhm.
able to create that sense of safety for ourselves, I think, is hugely important. And you can start really small. You can start by doing like breathing exercises. So when you feel yourself start to get, right, just take some breaths and try to relax, because the more you can breathe, the less you're going to react, right? When you
Mhm.
take that step back, you take that pause to breathe, you can then come back and be like, okay, so what is, in a way, and I think we do that unconsciously, is we're less likely to react if our nervous system feels a little bit more settled. The other thing that we can do is prioritizing sleep and good food, right? I mean, I'm sure you've been
You're
in
speaking my
situ
language, Alex.
I'm sure you've been in situations where it's like you get like 2 hours of sleep and the next day you're like grumpy bear, right? And so being able to get good sleep, even if you wake up in the middle of the night and you might have those racing thoughts, trying to find ways to cope so that you can get a good night's sleep
Mhm.
is is important. Something else you might want to do is, if so, one of the things that I discovered over the years is that if my desk is messy, my head is messy. If my house is messy, my head is a freaking disaster. So
Mhm.
keeping an environment that feels ah, like you come home and you're like, that feels
Mhm.
better.
Like, have your
So
happy space. Like they say, men
yeah,
have their man caves, or I honestly don't know anybody who actually has one of those. But for women, I
your
mean,
husband might.
I don't know. I actually, maybe my husband does upstairs, his office. I never go up there because it's his office, is his music room. So maybe he does have something similar. Um, but I think for women, we have the house, all of the
Yeah,
house is our house, right? But to have a place in that house, for me, it's coming down into my office, not sitting here at my desk per se.
yeah, yeah.
I have a beautiful couch over here, to my left. And some days I just sit down here and read.
Yeah, yeah.
I take a nap down here. I'm not a big napper, but every now and then you need a little bit of that nap, like you mentioned. Get rest. If you're not sleeping at
So
night,
important. Yeah,
just to rewind there, if you're not sleeping at night, your cortisol level is going through the roof, right? Your fight or flight, we say that wrong, fight or flight instincts
hmm,
are elevated, and that's why you're constantly feeling
yeah,
like that anxiety. And yes, sleep is going to be the first thing that goes, right? So even taking a 15-minute power nap, is so nourishing. And that's a word actually we haven't really used in this conversation. But I think nourishing ourselves, yes, eating real food, but in
Yeah.
other ways, like how are we nourishing our bodies? What are some of the ways that you nourish yourself and your soul and your body?
Ooh,
That's all.
music. Music is one way. I discovered recently that I am feeling a strong need to reconnect to my French roots. And so normally at lunchtime, I'll throw on Netflix or whatever just because I'm just doing stuff and I need the distraction. But I started to listen to French music again, right? And that feeds my soul. So that's one thing. Another thing is spending time in nature, right? And resourcing through just going for a walk. I mean, I'm fortunate enough that right in front of my house is a river, and I can just go sit out there and just spend the time doing nothing, but just watching the flow of the river. I did that, what was it, Tuesday morning? Usually I make my tea and I come to work and I'm like, on my computer and everything. And I was
Yep.
like, this is just not working for me. And so I sat in the kitchen with my cup of tea, just watching the river. And it's like, it just like my day was so different just because it didn't start with chaos,
Mm-hmm.
right? So finding those little rituals that don't have to work for anybody else. Because when I think about morning routine, everybody tells
Mm-hmm.
you, you got to get up, you got to work out, you got to meditate, you got to read, you got to do all these things, right? And I'm
And then all of a sudden it's noon.
like, like it just stresses me out just thinking about having to do all these things. But getting up, making my tea, sitting in front of the window and watching the morning unfold with my cup of tea, and I'm like, I could get used to this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So just little things like that. Bottom line is this. I feel that it's whatever makes you feel good,
Mm.
just freaking do that.
I love that.
That's it.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think we put too much on ourselves. And it's funny, you and I do a lot of the same. I get up in the morning. It's the only time I drink coffee. I have one cup of coffee, and this has only been since menopause, right?
Okay.
I was getting to a point where I was drinking a full pot of tea to wake up in the morning. So one cup of coffee. When the weather's nice, I will sit outside on my little swing. It's right. I literally go outside. Our deck is on the second level, so I'm
Okay.
at the treetops.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm looking at the trees and I'm watching the birds. And the other day I'm like, oh my gosh, an eagle. Just, and
Yeah.
some days I'm out there for 15 minutes, some days I'm out there longer, right? I kind of think of this also as, you know, a meditation. I'm
Hmm.
not thinking about what's on social media and all the nonsense that's on TV. I'm just sitting and experiencing. And I think part of meditation is the experience. You don't have to be, a yogi that does hours and hours of meditation. That's never going to be me. I truly cannot sit still that long.
Hmm.
My nickname in college was PM, perpetual motion. I've learned to chill out about that a bit. And hence my morning coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. And building on that, I feel like being mindful, just being in the present moment is just as good as meditation. The,
Absolutely.
the whole point is to just be in the moment, to be present, to listen, to smell, to feel, without thinking about, oh, I got to send those 15 emails and I have to do XYZ and I got to pick up the kids. And it's like, no, like I always tell my clients, nothing time is not nothing.
I
Nothing
agree.
time is
Mhm.
your time to take a breath, your time to goof off, which is
I
like,
love it. I
please
mean, that's
do more
play.
of
We
that.
used to go out and play when we were kids, right? I love that.
So it's time that is well spent
Hmm.
unless you want to lose your ish by the end of the day.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. One last question. Well, one last question before my last question. What is a first step for someone who's trying to imagine what this next step or this next phase of their life is going to be? And I'll be interested to hear because you talk about different new phase in life, as do I, for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be interested to hear how close you and how much you and I think alike.
So tell me the question because I got lost for a second.
Yep. For women who are in this next phase, what's the first thing that they to do in order to really be able to figure out what this next phase in life is going to look like?
So it's interesting that you said, what's the first thing to do? And I'm going to say the first thing to do is to be and just be you and do the things you love, but don't. I think we tie so much of our identity to what we can provide that the first step is really to just know that just who we are,
Mhm.
that in itself is a gift. Our worth and our value is not tied to what we can provide. Is it a plus? Yeah. Is it a way to get some recognition? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But we are enough just being, just because we're here,
Mhm.
right? So I also feel like when we do, it's out there.
Mm.
When we be, it's in here. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's the big distinction is that all of the stuff that we do out there, let's start to bring some of those things back in
Mhm.
because that's where it starts. Because if we're good in here, everything else is so much easier.
Right, kind of like if we be who we are and do the things we love, then we will have those things that we desire.
Agreed. And on top of that, if we are doing things that are not in alignment with who we are,
Mm.
then depletion comes in, right? We get tired. We're constantly wearing a mask and it gets hard to breathe,
Yeah,
right? So
true.
making sure that we know who we are, we know what we want, acting, behaving, speaking, thinking in alignment with those beliefs. And I feel like the world changes because the energy that we put out there is completely different. And the universe is like, ooh, I like that shining star. Let me bring them, give her what she wants.
Yeah.
Right? It's different. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel
Mhm.
contrived. It just it, it's natural and it feels good. And we begin to feel like
Mhm.
this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yep. I love it. I love it. It's so true. Um, we have to learn that truth ourselves,
Hmm.
though, right?
Yes.
So is there, before we start closing up, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to mention?
Um, I think depending on where women are in their process, before they can embark on this journey, they need to give themselves the chance to grieve. They need to grieve, even if you're the one who asked for divorce, right?
Mhm.
Because there's still a grieving process that happens. When it happens is different. But assuming you've been hit with this thing, right? You you have to be able to grieve it. And there is no timeline but yours. When people are like, well, it's been 2 months, you should be over this by now. And it's like, for some people, yeah, that's
Mhm.
enough. For others, it's 2 years. That process can take up to 5 years. So we have to allow for that grief and for digesting and going through and trying to understand our pain, because the more we can do that, the better the foundation we're going to lay for understanding who we are and what we want moving forward. So it's like going to the hospital because you have an infection,
Mhm.
right? And you don't give the infection the chance to go away completely. And you try to, get back to your normal life, and what happens? Little by little, that comes back.
Mhm.
So giving yourself as much time as you need to take, and don't let people tell you that your grief isn't worthwhile because you haven't lost someone,
Oh.
right? Because the way society views bereavement for somebody who becomes a widow or a
Mhm.
widower is not the same. There is a validity is not the right word. There is an acknowledgement or a different type of acknowledgement when you lose a spouse because they've gone, right? When you lose a spouse because they're checking up with whoever, right? It's not viewed as the same. It's not viewed as the same
Mm.
depth of loss.
That's interesting because grief in itself is not just one emotion.
Hmm.
It's all those emotions tied together. It's disbelief, it's anger, it's resentment, it's sometimes laughter, inappropriately, all the,
Sometimes it's relief.
yeah.
So you have to give yourself the chance to grieve, and to grieve in the right way, not to rush the process, not to listen when people tell you you should be over it by now, and also not to rush into the next thing,
Mm.
because when you understand, when you grieve something, it just means that you've lost something that you love, something that was important to you.
Mhm.
And being able to go through that process is what is going to give you the best tools for moving forward. Because I'm sure you know people that are like, why do I always keep dating these losers? Right?
Mhm.
Well, maybe look at what the common denominator is, right? Because that comes from self-awareness. And if you don't take the time to grieve and to really take an honest look at what happened, and it's never all his fault, all her fault. We
Right.
all have a role to play. I couldn't move forward until I stopped blaming my ex for everything, and I was like, well, I did everything I could to save the marriage, so it was all his fault. Technically, no. Like, you giving him the silent treatment's probably not the best form of communication, right?
There you go.
So being able to give yourself the time to do that is critical.
And as you said, mentioned earlier, and the grace to allow it to happen in its time.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So, Alex, thank you for this conversation. I know there's so much more we can talk
My
about.
pleasure.
But I want you to tell us a little bit about your awakened heroine journey program.
So
If you
it's
tell us a
a
little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to do that.
Oh,
It's a
absolutely.
6-month program, where really we kind of go back to the beginning, right? We go back to after you've had a chance to grieve, after you've had a chance to um, kind of get a feel for what happened and where you are, and you're ready to start moving forward. Um, we'll take you through the process where, you start with getting to the root of everything and set the foundation for how you want to move forward from here. We help you to really reclaim who you are and rediscover your authentic self so that your identity becomes just an expression of who you are, not an expression of the label that you're wearing. Will help you to really rebuild your life on your terms. And then from there, we talk about and we walk you through really being able to lead from a place of strength, but also a place of softness. Because once you're strong in who you are, that's when you can start to be strong for other people. But you can't do that until you have that foundation in place. So that's the awakened heroine journey.
I love it. I love it. And so for people to start, I know you have a free gift that will allow people to kind of start in that. So just tell us about that real quick.
So it's what I'm offering is the boost to boost your confidence after heartbreak, because one of the things that happens is, obviously, no matter who you are, your confidence when you go through that is going to tank. So it's just a few tips and tricks to really help you to look for different ways to find that confidence again. Some of them are, tried and true. Some of them are a little bit different. But all of them are going to help you to really be able to start to step into that confidence. And for some people, it's just a nice reminder. And for other people, it's like, I hadn't thought of doing that. Let me try and see what happens. So it's just a short workbook. And yeah, that's what it is.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure that we have all the links to your website, to your to the program, and to the freebie, the workbook there, because I think it's really important. We have these conversations and we want people to take what they've heard and pull out the nuggets, but also to be able to put them into practice in their life. Alex, thank you so much. I always love talking to you. We have so much fun. You're brilliant and so down to earth. And I think that's really helpful for women, in this stage, whether it's menopause is driving them crazy and their husbands are driving them crazy, or they're at this place where, they're, in the middle of a divorce or at the end of a divorce and kind of going to, now what? You are there for women and in such a powerful way. So thank you for what you do. And thank you, of course, for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for what you do, because I'll be honest, until you turned me on to those hormones, I thought I was going to commit harakiri. So thank you so much for that.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the plug there. Everyone, thank you for being here. We will see you next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific time. Until then, I leave you with this, everyone. Healthy living, happy midlife.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Healthy Living, Happy Midlife. My hope is that today's conversation left you inspired, encouraged, and ready to take the next step toward creating a vibrant, fulfilling life that you deserve. Remember, you don't have to settle for fatigue, brain fog, or frustration. Midlife is not the end of your story. It's the doorway to your next best chapter. And I'm here to help you walk through it with energy, with confidence, and with joy. So if you're ready to take this journey further, I invite you to schedule a free strategy call with me. The link is in the show notes. And together we'll design a plan that works for you at this time in your life, for your body. So be sure to subscribe, rate, and review your show, the show on your favorite podcast platform. Catch the video version on YouTube so you never miss another episode. Share it with a friend who needs to hear that midlife can truly be the most powerful season of her life. Until next time, I'm Denise Stegall, reminding you that healthy living, happy midlife is not just possible, it's yours for the taking.